Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take complex, often misunderstood concepts and, well, we try to untangle the threads for you. Today, we are diving into a worldview that was really the absolute foundation of the Viking Age. We're talking about the Norse concept of fate.
And that's a topic that I think when you mention Norse fate to most people, their minds immediately jump to this idea of grim resignation.
Right, a kind of cultural shrug.
Exactly. This idea that it's all decided, so why even bother? But that assumption that that fatalism, it completely misses the entire point of what made the Norse philosophical engine run.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to explore the nuances of a belief system that was forged in, radical uncertainty. We're talking about a culture shaped by conditions that were just unforgiving. Long, dark, lethal winters, the constant risk of piracy, of warfare.
And just the terrifying knowledge that a ship could be lost or a life could end without any warning at all.
That kind of environment, it doesn't really allow for the illusion of control, does it?
Not at all. It forced the Norse people to confront the reality that so many external events, the sea, the weather, the sword of an enemy, were often completely outside of individual control.
But, and this is the key part, instead of that generating apathy,
It did the opposite. It led to this incredibly intense focus on the one thing they could control.
their response.
Their response, precisely.
So our core thesis for this deep dive is to explore that balance the Vikings believed in. The idea that some elements of existence were, well, they were fundamentally woven into the fabric of reality.
Set in stone by cosmic forces.
Exactly. But the ethical and the behavioral response to those constraints was absolutely a matter of choice. It's that dynamic tension, that push and pull between destiny and decision that we're really focusing on.
And I think you'll find this belief system is far more subtle, stranger, and frankly, much more poetic than our modern, simplistic interpretations of destiny.
How so?
Well, it's a philosophy that paradoxically acknowledged this immense cosmic limitation specifically to demand radical personal action heroism, even from every single individual.
Okay, that's a fascinating framework. Let's unpack that, starting with the very word they use to describe this fixed structure of fate. So, if fate isn't just about inevitable doom, but about a defined structure within which life unfolds, what was the Old Norse term they used to capture this underlying reality?
The central term is urlog,
Urlog.
pronounced roughly urlug, and the etymology of that word is just incredibly rich. It doesn't really translate to destiny in our modern sense of, a specific future script.
So what does it mean more literally?
It means something like primordial law, or even more literally, that which is laid down at the beginning.
That which is laid down.
I like that.
It's foundational.
It's just a blueprint, right? But not necessarily a detailed day-by-day itinerary. It reminds me of the analogy we often use. It's not a fixed script.
It's more like a path.
A path through a very specific landscape.
Exactly. Imagine you have to traverse a vast, difficult terrain. Urlug defines the forest you were in, the massive mountains you have to cross, and the general direction of the coastline. These are givens. You can't just decide to move the mountains.
You can't move the mountains. You can't prevent the harsh winter from coming. They are part of the map.
But the choice is in the navigation.
The choice is entirely in the navigation. Do you march quickly or take time to rest? Do you face the obstacles head on or try to sneak around them? Do you sing while you march or do you complain?
So Urlug defines the framework, the starting points, the major milestones, but the manner of your walking, the quality of your character displayed on that journey.
Yes.
That's the choreography you choose.
Precisely. That is where free will lives.
So to make this a bit more practical for you listening,
Yeah.
if Urlog defines the framework, let's break down those unchangeable baseline parameters. The initial set of cards you were dealt at birth, the sources detail, 4 main fixed elements. The first, and arguably the most socially impactful, was your family.
Yes, your lineage was entirely fixed. You couldn't choose your ancestors, and the reputation, the status, the honor, or the shame that came with that lineage was immediately inherited by you.
So if your grandfather was a great hero,
You started life with inherent credit. You had a good name. But if he was a landless coward, you started with a substantial deficit. And this wasn't just a social thing, it was considered part of your your spiritual heritage.
that deep dive into family, it connects you instantly to the community's structure and that whole eternal cycle of memory.
Of course.
So if a Viking was born into a family with, say, a blood feud attached to it, that feud was just part of his Urlog. regardless of his personal feelings about it.
He was destined to meet that conflict. That's a crucial point. Urlog wasn't just individual, it was familial and societal. If your kinsman had a debt of vengeance, that debt became one of your predetermined challenges. Your path was shaped by the actions of those who came before you.
Okay, so family's number one. What's the second fixed element?
The second would be your inherent gifts and flaws, what we might call your potentiality.
So your natural constitution.
Exactly. Were you physically strong, quick-witted, prone to melancholy, or were you naturally skilled in poetry or maybe boat building? These deep-seated characteristics, your temperament and your physical limits, they were all woven into your destiny from the start.
So if your gifts are fixed, does that suggest a lack of social mobility or, personal development? Or was it more about just recognizing your nature?
It was definitely more about recognizing your base nature, the clay you were given to mold.
So you still had to do the work.
Oh, absolutely. If your Urlo gave you the gift of a skilled hand, you still had to work tirelessly to become a master smith. The potential was fixed, but the realization of that potential required free will and a lot of effort.
And a person could defy their gifts by being lazy.
Or transcend their limitations by being relentlessly disciplined. The choice was always there.
Okay, that makes sense. The third parameter you mentioned was social standing. Now, that seems linked to family, but you're saying it's distinct.
It is distinct because it defines your legal and hierarchical place in the immediate community. Are you a thrall, a slave, a carl, a free farmer, or a jarl, a chieftain? This status immediately set boundaries on property rights, on marriage partners, on the legal value of your life itself.
So a thrall's life was literally worth less compensation under the law.
Regardless of his personal bravery or skill,
Yes.
that was a fixed parameter of his life's journey.
And finally, the last element, the one that most resembles what we think of as traditional fate. The key events you were destined to meet, the unavoidable appointments.
Yes. The sagas are absolutely filled with these fixed points. The destined time and place of your death, the specific great challenge you were meant to face, the destined enemy you would clash with. These were fixed milestones on your path that you couldn't bypass.
You could maybe postpone them.
You could try, but you couldn't avoid them. You could only postpone them or handle them poorly.
So if Urlog draws the coordinates on the map, your starting point, the fixed challenges, the general direction, then everything in between, the daily choices, the effort you apply, the quality of your interactions, that's where human agency comes in.
That is the critical distinction, and it's the source of all Viking philosophy. The arc of your life is predetermined, but what you do with that arc, how you respond to the betrayal, how you leverage your gifts when the challenge comes, whether you choose honor over temporary comfort, that is your test.
This inherent belief structure, that the framework is fixed but the ethical response is chosen, that has to be why honor and reputation weren't just, societal niceties for the Vikings.
They were absolute existential necessities.
Because if you're destined to meet a fatal challenge,
The only variable left to maximize is the legacy you leave behind. The Norns, as we'll see, set the stage, but the individual selects the quality of the performance. This demanded a level of personal accountability that is almost staggering in its severity.
it demands heroism, really. It strips away all excuses for cowardice or inaction.
It does. It essentially says, you cannot complain about the hand you were dealt because you have the absolute power to choose how you play it. And that choice, that single choice, determines your eternal fame.
Okay, so if Orlog is the foundational law, who are the cosmic engineers continually enforcing and weaving this structure? Now we have to turn to the Norns.
The Norns. They are arguably the most ancient and potent figures in the Norse cosmology. They're sort of the constant maintenance crew of reality, and they operate at the very axis of existence.
They're not like the gods in the Greek or Roman world, are they?
No, not at all. The Norns are not necessarily worshipped in the same way, but they are feared and respected universally, even by the gods themselves.
And their location alone tells you a lot about their power. They reside at the base of Yggdrasil, the world tree.
They do, specifically by the Well of Ur. It's often called the Well of Fate, or more accurately, the Well of the Past.
And this isn't just a pool of water.
Oh no. It is the repository of all that has been, and it is what is currently fueling the existence of the entire cosmos. Every single day, the Norns draw water from this well and mix it with clay to water the roots of Yggdrasil,
To keep it from withering.
to prevent the tree and thus all of existence from withering away.
So they're literally preserving the universe by constantly nourishing it with the foundation of the past. It's a powerful image.
It is.
Let's introduce the famous three Norns, because their names are, in themselves, a profound meditation on the nature of time.
Right. So the first, Urer, is foundational. Her name means that which has become.
The past.
She is the past. The established facts, the things already done, the fixed threads of Urlug that cannot be undone. She represents history and established consequence.
Then we have Verandi. Now, she's often mistranslated as just the present, but her name is more dynamic than that, isn't it?
It is much more dynamic. It means that which is becoming.
Is becoming, so it's active.
It's an active, continuous process. Verandi is the act of fate unfolding right now, this very moment. She's the bridge between the consequence that Ura represents and the obligation that, well, that Skuld represents. She is where choices are currently being made and threads are actively being laid down.
And that brings us to the third, Skuld. Her name means that which should come, or even more powerfully, debt or obligation.
Yes, debt is a very good way to put it. She represents the future, but a future that is required by the threads that have already been woven by the past and present.
It's not just random possibility, then.
Not at all. It's the consequence that is owed to past and present actions. So if a warrior acts dishonorably today, Skuld ensures that an obligation of shame or misfortune will be paid tomorrow.
And if a hero dies bravely,
Skuld guarantees a debt of honor will be repaid in fame. She balances the cosmic books.
So when you look at them this way, as this constant flow of past, becoming, and owed future, you realize the Norns aren't just deciding fate.
They are the process of time itself in the cosmos.
They don't just hold a finished scroll of your life.
No, they are perpetually weaving and repairing the cosmic fabric moment by moment. They're weavers, but the sources also say they are carvers.
Carvers.
Yes, that they carve the destinies of men into wood or stone, the runes of Urlug. And this act of carving is perpetual. They are constantly deciding, adjusting, and reinforcing the lines of fate based on the input they receive from the world.
Now let's get into a fascinating and, I think, often overlooked detail that adds a whole new layer of complexity to this. The personal Norns.
Oh, yes.
It wasn't just the big three at the well controlling your life.
This is absolutely critical for understanding the individual's experience of fate. The Poetic Edda confirms that every single person had their own set of attendant Norns assigned to them at birth, who were separate from the great Norns at Yggdrasil.
So Urir, Verdandi, and Skuld are like the universal lawmakers.
And the personal Norns are the specific agents managing your individual application of those laws, the case officers, if you will.
How diverse were these personal Norns? Were they all thought of as a team or as individual agents with their own agendas?
They could vary wildly. The sources suggest they often consisted of multiple entities, and not all of them were benevolent.
Really?
Oh, yes. Some personal Norns were described as high-born and wise, carefully weaving threads of fortune, talent, and long life for their person. But others were described as malicious or just spiteful.
And what would they do?
They would weave short, frayed threads, leading to hardship, ill health, and early death.
You know, that offers a really powerful psychological framework for dealing with suffering.
How do you mean?
Well, if a Viking had terrible luck or constantly faced misfortune, he didn't necessarily have to blame himself for some vengeful god. He could attribute it to the specific craftsmanship of his assigned unseen forces.
That's the key rationalization. It wasn't random bad luck. It was the specific quality of the Norns you were assigned. If a man was landless and constantly suffering accidents, well, he was simply assigned troublesome weavers who enjoyed making things difficult for him.
And that would allow the individual to bear that suffering with a kind of pride, right? Knowing it was an external imposition, not a personal failing.
Exactly. And conversely, if someone was blessed with health, wealth, and power, they recognized this as favorable threads woven by benevolent Norns.
Which demanded that they honor that luck through virtuous action.
Yes. It reinforces this idea that life's initial starting point is fundamentally unequal, and this inequality is cosmic. It's built into the system.
And that leads directly to the ethical mandate we talked about.
It does. If your Norns give you a favorable path, you have a duty to act honorably to preserve that gift. If they give you a harsh path, your only duty is to meet that harshness with unparalleled courage, to build a legacy that transcends their limitations.
So in either case,
the focus always returns to action.
Which brings us to the ultimate paradox of the Norse world. If your destiny has these fixed limitations, what is the point of personal struggle?
And the answer, which you see over and over in the sagas, is the central pillar of Viking ethics. Your death is fated, but the quality of your action in the face of that fate is what defines your entire existence.
It's an incredibly empowering philosophy when you think about it.
It is. Fate limits the length of your life, but your free will dictates its breadth and depth. The focus shifts entirely from how long you survive to how effectively you maximize your brief time to create something that lasts.
And what lasts? It's not material wealth. It's not even your physical existence.
No.
This is perfectly captured in the wisdom of the Havamal, which is, the foundational poem of the Viking Age, the famous line,
Cattle die, kinsmen die.
"One thing never dies, the fame of a noble deed."
That is the eternal truth for the Norse hero. Cattle die, meaning all your material possessions, they decay, they pass into the hands of others, they're subject to the whims of fortune.
And kinsmen die.
Meaning, even your family ties are eventually severed by death. But the fame of a noble deed that is carved into the collective memory, it's the story that other people tell about you, which literally extends your existence past the moment of your fated death.
So the goal isn't to escape fate. That's impossible. But to meet it in such a way that your actions feed the internal part of your being.
Your reputation, your saga.
Let's ground this in a specific example from the sagas, because they're full of them.
Of course. Consider the story of Gunnar of Liarendi, a great hero often noted for his courage. Gunnar, despite prophecies and warnings telling him about specific dangers, never shied away from conflict.
He knew it was coming.
He knew. And when he was destined to fall, surrounded by his enemies at his home, he fought until his bowstring broke. He knew his fate was sealed, but he did not surrender. He did not beg. He faced it with absolute dignity.
His choice wasn't whether to fight, but how to use those final moments. Even his last breath became a moment of crafting his legacy.
Exactly. The warrior's mind wasn't focused on survival, which was arbitrary and out of his hands, but on performance, which was eternal and entirely within his control. This is the ultimate expression of the paradox.
Destiny sets the endpoint.
But agency dictates the meaning.
Let's stress the nature of this empowering paradox again, because it directly challenges so many modern views of causality and, victimhood.
The constraints are crystal clear. You cannot choose the day of your death, nor can you choose the catastrophic events, the betrayals, the illnesses, the losses that the Norns have set for you.
But the choice is absolute.
It is. You always choose your attitude, your commitment, your action, and whether you meet those circumstances with honor or with shame.
This ethical structure is why the Vikings fundamentally despised cowardice. It wasn't just a weakness.
No, avoidance of fate wasn't just seen as pointless because fate would catch up anyway. It was actively shameful because it meant the individual wasted their fated opportunity to display virtue.
So running away from a destined challenge, say, refusing a duel you were fated to fight, was the one truly unforgivable sin.
Because you couldn't avoid the fate itself, but you could avoid the noble action required to meet it well. And by doing that, you ensured a legacy of shame.
And shame was the ultimate second death.
Absolutely. To die bravely meant a temporary mortal death and an eternal saga. To live a long life but a shameful one meant the immediate death of your reputation, often while you were still breathing. The choice for them was clear. Embrace the glorious fated death or suffer the long, ignoble, chosen life.
Okay, so if fate is this meticulously woven tapestry, it stands to reason that the Norse believed they could, glimpse the blueprint, even if they couldn't redraw the whole plan. So how do they actively try to read these breadcrumbs from the Norns that were scattered throughout the world?
They lived in what you could call a hyper-aware spiritual landscape. The primary method was the interpretation of spiritual signs, and dreams were right at the top of that list.
Dreams weren't just idle chatter of the mind for them.
Not at all. They were direct, encoded messages from the unseen realm, often delivered by one's personal Norns or other spirits.
Let's delve into some of those specific dream interpretations, the language of the unconscious for the Viking.
The symbolism was often stark and elemental. Dreaming of the sea, for instance, especially if it was dark, churning, or encroaching on your home.
A death omen.
A powerful death omen. It suggested your time was short and the watery underworld was calling to you. Wolves were another one, almost universally seen as harbingers of destruction, warfare, or betrayal.
And what about omens that were less about doom and gloom?
Well, objects of value, like dreaming of silver or gold, were complex. They certainly could signal that destiny was pulling you toward wealth, but the interpretation always carried this moral caveat.
A test.
A test, exactly. Was the gold given to you freely, suggesting an honorable gain? Or did you have to seize it violently, suggesting a moral failure or a greed that would inevitably lead to a fated conflict? The Norns often posed these moral tests disguised as blessings.
Yeah. So beyond the internal messages of dreams, they were constantly seeking omens in the external waking world as well.
Yes, constantly. They treated the natural world as a running commentary from the Norns. They paid immense attention to animal behavior, especially the flight and the calls of birds.
Like the Romans in augury.
Very similar idea, yes. Treating their movements as divinatory. A sudden, inexplicable change in the weather. Even a small, localized storm, when the sky was otherwise clear, was viewed as a direct sign that the Norns were acting, perhaps sealing a conflict or introducing a new thread into the weave.
And then there are the human omens, the overheard words. That's a fascinating one.
It is a spontaneous, seemingly random snatch of conversation. A word spoken in haste or overheard from a stranger passing by was often treated as highly potent, as carrying a message meant just for the listener.
It's like the universe whispering in your ear.
They were the Norns' quiet hints, the breadcrumbs that gave you a directional cue. Living this way meant constant vigilance, viewing the world as a narrative unfolding specifically for you.
So when the signs were too complex or a crucial decision needed guidance, they turned to the specialists.
They turned to the seers, specifically the vulvas.
Describe their role for us.
The vulvas, the women who carried the staff of prophecy, they held immense power and prestige. They often traveled from community to community, and their authority came from their ability to practice or ritual magic.
Which involved what exactly?
It involved entering a highly trance-like state, often with the help of ritual and song, to peer directly into the threads of Orlog.
So how was a vulva's method different from just, simple fortune-telling?
A vulva wasn't predicting lottery numbers. Her role was to map the weave of fate and identify the forces at play. Through song, what they called galder, and ritual, she would connect to the Norns realm and report back on the direction the thread was pulling, or the specific consequences of a past action.
So they didn't say, you will die on Tuesday.
No, never that specific. They would say something more like, the threads leading south are currently fraught with peril and dishonor, which will hasten the debt owed to Skuld.
That guidance sounds purely directional, which aligns with the idea that choice still dictates the execution.
Exactly. The vulva provided the best assessment of the fixed landscape. She gave the client the optimal chance to meet their fate with preparation and with honor. It was a tactical assessment of destiny, not an escape route.
Which leads us to the most complex issue here. Could fate actually change? If the Norns are weaving, could a human action compel them to reweave or change direction?
The sources offer a complicated, but I think ultimately a highly sophisticated answer to that.
Which is?
Certain core elements, particularly the time and the manner of certain fated key events, were fixed. If Skuld had written that you would die in battle, that was fixed. There was no getting around that.
There's a but.
There's a but. The quality of the thread, the flavor of the journey, could absolutely be influenced by human action.
How so?
The Norns were sentient, they were responsive, and they were paying attention to human virtue. This is where free will constantly interacts with destiny. The currency they dealt in was honor, integrity, and particularly the sanctity of oaths.
Explain how an oath or an act of cowardice could literally alter the quality of one's destiny.
Well, keeping an oath, upholding your word, even at great personal cost, was seen as strengthening the fabric of reality itself. It essentially signaled to your personal Norns that you were worthy of favorable weaving.
And this gave rise to the idea that virtue could strengthen your luck.
Precisely. Luck or gifting wasn't random. It was a positive reinforcement, a response from your personal Norns to your honorable behavior.
So conversely, breaking an oath, acting with profound cowardice, or performing some monstrous act that would introduce chaos and fragility into your Orlog.
Exactly. This could invite misfortune, it could shorten your life, or it could ensure that when your fated challenge finally arrived, you were ill-equipped. Perhaps you'd suffer a sudden illness, or your weapons would fail at the critical moment.
All facilitated by malevolent personal Norns taking advantage of your dishonor.
Yes. So, while you couldn't change the fated challenge itself, your choices absolutely dictated your preparedness and the strength of the thread that held you.
So, Norse fate is not about passive resignation at all. It's a dynamic, interactive contract.
It is a contract where human ethical behavior actively determines the quality of the life lived within fixed cosmic parameters. It demands that you treat every moment, every decision, as a thread being woven into your ultimate tapestry.
If fate and choice are a dance, then there is no more intense stage for that dance than the battlefield. Combat was the ultimate, inescapable test of Urlog.
For the Viking, battle was the scheduled meeting with destiny. If the Norns had decreed your death on that field, you couldn't dodge the spear.
But you could ensure the spear found you facing forward, roaring a challenge.
That was the only choice that mattered.
We have to talk about the Valkyries here, because they complicate the idea of a purely deterministic fate. We often think of them as just the taxi service to Valhalla.
They are far more active than that. The Valkyries, the choosers of the slain, were believed to have the authority, perhaps granted by Odin, perhaps by Skuld, to influence the mechanics of battle itself.
How so?
They didn't just appear when a warrior fell. They were there to note the moment Urlog was sealed, and they could actively guide the events leading up to it.
So they might subtly ensure a warrior slips on the ice at the right moment, or that an enemy's strike is just slightly deflected to delay a fated death for a few more seconds?
Exactly. They are agents ensuring that fate is fulfilled, but with some flexibility on the minute details. It just solidifies the mindset.
The mindset being?
The Viking warrior didn't ask, why bother fighting if I'm fated to die? Their internal dialogue was, if today is my day, then let the Valkyrie see a death so spectacular it earns me a seat in Valhalla.
The goal wasn't survival.
The goal was maximizing the reputation earned by the imminent, fated death. Death was a scheduled, inevitable appointment. Shame was the only thing worth fearing.
Okay, now let's pivot to the grandest and really the most tragic application of Urlog, the fate of the gods themselves. This is the radical core of Norse cosmology.
It is. This is what sets the Norse pantheon so far apart. In so many other belief systems, the gods are eternal. They're above fate.
But not here.
In the Norse world, Orlog is superior to all, even Odin. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, is not a possibility or a risk. It is a destiny. It is carved into the ancient runes.
And Odin, the All-Father, the relentless seeker of knowledge, he hangs himself from Yggdrasil, he sacrifices an eye at the well of Mimir, all in pursuit of wisdom.
And he does all this because he knows the timeline. He knows the end is coming, fixed and immutable.
And this is where his agency is most profoundly displayed.
It is. Odin cannot stop Ragnarok. But every single action he takes, his ceaseless gathering of knowledge, his recruitment of the Einherjar, the fallen heroes, to Valhalla, his maneuvering of Loki and the giants, it's all an attempt to prepare for it.
To delay it.
To delay it, and to ensure that when the final battle comes, the gods meet their fated end with the utmost dignity and might.
His wisdom doesn't grant him an escape hatch.
It grants him the knowledge of the best way to meet his glorious fixed destruction.
And that is the ultimate confirmation of the human ethical mandate.
It is. If the highest god must face his own predetermined tragic end, if even he cannot escape the framework of Urlog, then humans have zero cause to complain about their own limited, finite destinies.
The lesson is universal.
Destiny is constraint, but preparation and courage are choice.
Before we conclude this deep dive, I want to connect these ancient concepts to, the modern ear. You listening are looking for relevance. And the parallels between Urlog and our modern understanding of life's constraints are just incredibly resonant.
They translate surprisingly well into contemporary psychology and even philosophy. The framework established by the Norns, it still exists for us today. We just use different names for it.
So if we look at the cards you were dealt, your family, your gifts, your physical makeup, that is fundamentally our concept of genetics and early childhood environment.
Absolutely. Your genetics are your modern Urlog. They set your base potential, your inherent health vulnerabilities, your natural aptitudes. You can't change your fundamental base code.
But you can choose how you train, how you nourish, and how you utilize that code.
Precisely.
And the distinction between the fated arc and the choices within it. That aligns perfectly with the distinction between external circumstances and self-mastery.
Your actions and your habits are how you play your hand. We know that consistent daily discipline and ethical choices can dramatically alter outcomes, even within genetic or socioeconomic constraints. Those daily choices are the threads you actively weave, either strengthening or fraying your luck.
And the relentless pursuit of a lasting legacy, the fame of a noble deed, that is directly analogous to our modern concept of building a robust and positive self-image.
Your self-image is your saga. It really is. It's the narrative you consciously build about yourself and the value you project to the world. A Viking was externally judged by his saga, We are often internally sustained by the positive narrative we hold about our own character and achievements.
And finally, the foundational importance of honor and reputation. For us today, that's essentially social capital, trust, and community.
That's the modern equivalent of honor. Your standing in your professional community, the trust you command among your friends, your reputation for integrity, that is the lifeblood that sustains you when personal misfortune strikes. The Norse framework proves astonishingly resilient. The constraints change, but the choice remains the same. Hashtag tag outro, host speaker, expert speaker.
So this deep dive into Urlug has revealed a belief system that is anything but simplistic fatalism. We've synthesized the Norse takeaway. Life has a definite shape, death has a scheduled time, and the path is marked by unavoidable milestones defined by a primordial law.
But the crux of the whole Norse philosophy is this. Destiny provides the boundaries, but meaning is generated entirely by the quality of the choice made within those boundaries.
Every choice, every act of courage, every upheld oath, every moment of discipline is the sole domain of the individual.
The Norns provide the raw, limiting material. The Viking, or any of us today, must choose how brightly, how nobly, and how enduringly that thread burns.
It empowers the individual by shifting the focus entirely.
If you cannot control the outcome, you must exert absolute control over the only variable that truly matters, your character.
And that leaves us with the ultimate provocative insight from this powerful and complex worldview, one that builds on everything we've discussed today. A life bound tightly by the inescapable strings of Urlug cannot ultimately be controlled. But a legacy, a saga, can always be meticulously crafted. And that is the true, heroic challenge posed by the Norse understanding of fate.
It's a challenge that still resonates thousands of years later.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the relentless yet beautiful world of Norse destiny. We'll see you next time.